This man appears gentle and sweet on the surface, but is a true murderer in secret. Despite his dual identity, he not only lives with his girlfriend, who is a police officer, but also works with her police officer father. He claims he wants to become an ordinary repairman in the future. The Serious Crime Unit has tirelessly pursued him, yet only found a black feather at the scenes. At every crime scene, he leaves behind a signature letter B, earning him the nickname Killer B. He has many fervent online fans and even a dedicated website. Unlike typical murderers, he only kills criminals who often frustrate the police. While the crime unit was still gathering information, this twisted man was watching a live battle royale show in the suburban area. His accomplice was assaulting a woman on the scene, first letting her run before shooting her leg with an arrow, like playing a game of wolf catching sheep. When the woman could no longer run, the criminals gathered around to assault her further. Just then, a flock of crows startled into the sky, and Killer B sprinted forward, swiftly killing the two twisted men. The man watching the live stream was terrified as he saw his brother fall and only a strange eye appeared on the camera. The next day, he reverted to his harmless young boy persona. His name is Koku, and he is now preparing to bring red bean bread to his girlfriend, Lily. However, upon hearing that Killer B had appeared again, Lily hurried to the scene, only to find it in chaos with only the criminals' bodies left. The police are always a step behind Killer B. Besides the signature letter B, there was just a feather at the scene. To capture this self-proclaimed vigilante, the retired genius detective Keith was called upon, a figure straight out of a case study book. While others frantically analyzed the footage for clues, he was sound asleep, occasionally drooling in his sleep. Elsewhere, Julian, who narrowly escaped death last night, was at home venting his anger with a gun, wishing he could shoot the person who killed his brother. Suddenly, a red-haired man burst into his house, urging him to take a tank onto the highway. The red-haired man explained that the person who harmed his brother only kills criminals, and by causing chaos in the city, Julian would have a chance for revenge. However, it was clear that Julian had become a pawn for the red-haired man, Quinn, a member of the Market Maker organization. The sudden tank attack threw the Serious Crime Unit into chaos. The team leader immediately deployed all personnel, hoping to stop it quickly. Meanwhile, Koku had already tapped into all the internal conversations of the team. His wall was covered with photos of all the criminals he had killed. He promptly arrived at the scene, ready to strike. By this time, Julian had gone mad, even blowing up a large ship. The police's old cars were no match for him. Quinn, with his own agenda, released a special smoke that blocked all radar detection, engulfing the crime unit's vehicles in smoke and preventing them from rashly chasing into a tunnel. When the police found the tank again, it was just an empty shell. They had to resort to technical means to search for their hideout but found nothing by midnight. Keith, with an intelligence of a million, immediately spotted that they were looking in the wrong direction. He then took out a writing pad and began scribbling wildly, proving his genius as a detective. He accurately located the criminal's hideout at an abandoned subway station using his formula. The Serious Crime Unit immediately set out for the subway station. As Keith had predicted, Quinn and Julian had already been there but were now on a large train, waiting for the police to take the bait. Indeed, Koku was always one step ahead of the Serious Crime Unit. He had just landed on the train when Julian tried to take revenge on him. By then, Julian had lost his value and Quinn stabbed him in the head, discarding him like trash. Quinn sent a message to someone and then engaged in a fight with Koku. Unbeknownst to Quinn, he too had become expendable to the organization. Ordinary blades couldn't stand against Koku, and soon Quinn's face was slashed. He was then stabbed in the head and incinerated by an electric current released by Koku. After dealing with the criminal, Koku departed. When the police arrived the next day, the train was completely wrecked. Keith realized he had made a wrong judgment. As the camera panned to the sky, the arrangement of the train wreckage was another trick by Killer B. To outsiders, this boy seems harmless, but secretly, he is a relentless murderer who targets only criminals. Now, he deliberately cut his palm as an excuse to ask his boss for leave, knowing that a criminal has resurfaced and he needs an excuse to leave and transform. The scene shifts to a hotel hosting a banquet attended by all the city's social elites, including the mayor. Therefore, the FBI set up nearly perfect security. However, famously, the FBI's intelligence is considered on par with Gotham City's police, and criminals had already infiltrated the event. One criminal disguised as a Japanese geisha captured everyone's attention with an outfit worth over $20 million. Their goal was to kill all the elites present. At this crucial event, the FBI was monitoring every movement through high-tech surveillance, ready to identify anyone moving against the flow or acting suspiciously. Koku had already blended in, disguised as a waiter. The geisha seemed to recognize him and whispered something to him, clearly provoking him. Soon, the FBI's system identified a man moving against the flow, a blonde man who had just passed by Koku. He walked straight towards the mayor and drew a dagger from behind a plate to stab him. Fortunately, the FBI's system provided an early warning, and he was stopped. Clearly, these criminals would not make such a basic mistake. This was just the first step of the crime. At the command of the blonde man, a hacker instantly hacked into the hotel's system, locking all the lights and exits, trapping everyone inside. The crazed blonde man demanded that the people at the scene kill the mayor immediately, or he would release a new type of poison gas that would kill everyone present. Then, the big screen showed a test subject of the poison gas. Inhaling it would rapidly corrode and decay the body. The blonde man, a deranged individual, declared that even if everyone died, others would only be known as unfortunate victims, while his name would live on in infamy. The sheriff was speechless, knowing this man would be despised forever. Fortunately, an FBI investigator, a computer expert, confidently stated that it wouldn't take long to crash the opposing hacker's computer. Elsewhere, Koku had already followed the geisha, named Izanami, a member of the market maker organization, to the rooftop. He smiled smugly, discarded his $20 million outfit, and pulled a grenade from under his skirt to fight Koku. During the fight, he spoke nonsense that Koku couldn't understand. Koku threw a knife, hitting a box that contained a skateboard Izanami had prepared earlier. Izanami then jumped down and incredibly skated down the building's wall. Their fight was observed by the genius detective Keith, who sensed something was off and immediately commandeered an FBI car to pursue them. Izanami's skateboarding skills were outrageous. Even Koku, with his supernatural wings, couldn't catch up. Izanami even managed to skate backward and shoot at Koku. They passed an innocent vehicle, leaving the driver baffled, and then Izanami disastrously blew up his car. Even if he fell off a cliff, Izanami could still land steadily on his skateboard. He then took out his phone to inform his accomplices, drawing out the real target, Koku. Once the hacker was no longer useful, he was silenced. Izanami then released poison gas at the hotel, paralyzing anyone who inhaled even a little. All hotel staff were knocked out by the gas, and the blonde man was dragged away by his young female accomplice. On the other side, Keith remained calm upon hearing the news, as he had already deduced that the hotel staff were not the real target of the criminals. He figured that the supposed poison gas was likely just a sleeping gas. From the criminals' actions, it was clear that these villains, obsessed with superficial aesthetics, would never choose such a gruesome way to die. Elsewhere, Koku had been taken to an island by Izanami. Koku tried to inquire about someone's existence from him. However, Izanami, suffering from a severe case of chunibu, made no sense to Koku. With no other option, they began to fight. Normal blades still couldn't compete against Koku, but unexpectedly, Izanami was also a person with supernatural abilities. He transformed his legs into blades. Their fight was fierce, with each move being strange and deadly. Ultimately, Koku was stabbed in the thigh, but Izanami was fatally stabbed in the heart and died on the spot. Before dying, he asked Koku to cut off his leg and take it, suggesting it would be useful later. When Keith arrived at the scene, only a blue oxidized coating on the water's surface remained. The gas in the hotel turned out to be just a sleeping gas, causing no injuries. The serious crime unit, once again, was outmaneuvered by the criminals. While working, police officer Brandon accidentally opened a suspicious program and saw it displaying his every move, captured by his own smartphone's camera. This clearly indicated there was a mole in the serious crime unit, and that the criminals had already infiltrated all electronic devices, monitoring every action of the unit. Brandon quickly copied the data from his computer. When colleagues attempted to help him in his frantic state, he immediately refused their assistance, no longer trusting anyone. He planned to quickly pack the data and escape, realizing that from the moment he discovered this secret, his safety was compromised. He hastily called his boss, Boris, trying to explain the situation in coded language. But Boris, busy at a party at Keith's house with other team members, failed to grasp the meaning and soon forgot about Brandon's issue. Brandon entered an elevator to escape, but when the elevator doors opened again, he was found dead on the ground, clutching a watch as if trying to convey a message. The iconic letter B was still visible on the wall, suggesting the involvement of Killer B doctors managed to save Brandon's life just in time, and explained that before losing consciousness, he had desperately requested the watch be given to genius detective Keith. However, everyone knows Killer B only targets criminals, and at this time, he appeared as an innocent-looking young boy. Koku quietly followed behind Keith, who was chatting with friends. Koku wore the same outfit and followed discreetly, seemingly waiting for an opportunity. Keith, with an IQ of 1,000,000, seemed to be idly staring at his watch, but he was actually close to solving the case. He later returned to the serious crime unit to inquire about someone's whereabouts. The scene shifts to Brandon's hospital room, where the man in black, the real murderer, attempts to finish off Brandon, who was not yet fully dead. However, Keith was already waiting there for him. Keith immediately recognizes that the knife the man is holding is from his own house, stealthily taken during the party. This narrows down the suspect significantly. Combining this with the clue from the watch, Keith concludes that the murderer is his assistant of over 20 years, Richard. Richard is ruthless. He vows to take away all that Keith holds dear, just like 8 years ago. He then picks up the knife he took from Keith's house and slashes his own throat, smearing his blood on Keith in an attempt to frame him. When Lily arrives at the scene, it is already chaotic. Richard, before dying, accuses Keith of being the murderer, trapping Keith in the accusation. Meanwhile, Koku has already taken Keith to the rooftop. Upon waking, Keith immediately recognizes the young man before him as the murderer who has been outwitting the serious crime unit. Koku seeks Keith because he learned from the deceased Izanami that Keith has information he needs. Koku tries to find out where Yuna is, but Keith calmly pours a cup of coffee and suggests that Koku's obsession with hunting criminals and leaving the signature letter B at crime scenes might actually be a message to a girl named Yuna. Keith deduces that it's not B, but rather the number 13, and next to it, the Roman numeral 4. Koku isn't interested in word games. He just wants to know where Yuna is. However, Keith has questions of his own. With a murder having occurred that day, Keith suggests they meet again tomorrow. The walls of this man's home are covered with dense formulas because he is actually a genius detective with an IQ of 1,000,000. Yet, this genius prefers to sleep on the floor and can trip over himself going downstairs, sometimes falling again right after getting up. While others are desperately hunting criminals, he can be found soundly asleep. But when he gets serious, he can pinpoint a criminal's location just using formulas. Unexpectedly, his assistant of 20 years betrayed him, committing suicide and framing Keith for the crime. As a key member of the serious crime unit, his teammates suspected foul play and turned a blind eye to the hunt for him. Even his boss, Boris, discreetly delivered crucial information to Keith because the next person Keith was to meet was the mysterious killer, Killer B, who has been outsmarting the serious crime unit for years. Keith only formally asked for the young man's name, as he had already guessed it was Koku, or subject number 13. Koku, surprised yet persistent, continued to inquire about the whereabouts of Yuna. His instincts told him that Yuna was still alive. Keith acknowledged this was entirely plausible, and then began to explain the full background of the situation. Since the 16th century, scientists have attempted to incorporate a fossil known as black jade into the human body. However, as the research deteriorated, not only did it fail, but it also created mentally deranged beings called the promised children, such as Quinn and Izanami. Instead of halting the experiments, the corrupt government established an organization for them called Market Maker. The government authorized market makers to freely create chaos and order. This explains why villains could operate the latest military tanks that even the army hadn't used, and why they could enter high-security banquets that not even a mouse could infiltrate, even nearly gassing everyone present. Ironically, the experiments eventually produced two successful subjects, Koku and Yuna, through genetic editing and the deciphering of ancient steles. The doctor who successfully performed the genetic editing was Keith's father, and it was a young Keith who managed to decipher the steles. The notebook bearing Koku's name was left by Keith's father. Before they could delve deeper, a young girl with a sword came seeking them. The battle between two superhumans could be fiercely intense. Koku transformed his hand into a blade, and with one powerful strike, he blew the temple's doors off their hinges. Surprisingly, the girl's blade could withstand Koku's attacks. In an instant, the temple's supports were all sliced through. To avoid being controlled by Koku's eyes, the girl even wore a mask during the fight, clearly under someone's guidance. The temple collapsed thunderously, but Koku, being the most successful of all the test subjects, knocked the girl unconscious with a simple kick. Despite her familiar look, Koku showed no mercy. Keith, knowing the truth, tried to stop Koku from killing the girl. Suddenly, Koku's lost memories resurfaced. This was Yuna, the girl he had been ruthlessly searching for over the years. Koku couldn't believe it. Yuna, however, cursed at him, her memories clearly altered, and even stabbed at Koku mercilessly with a knife. The pain in his palm was nothing compared to the agony in his heart, yet he still tried to awaken Yuna's memories. Keith watched helplessly from the side. At that moment, the spotlight focused on the spaceship, the villain's headquarters, where Koku had just been stabbed in the stomach. This act of stabbing matched the prophecies on the stele. Yuna's fading memories began to return bit by bit. She softly called out Koku's name. Ignoring the knife in his stomach, they embraced tightly. But suddenly, a sharp blade pierced through both of them. The person behind this was the leader of Market Maker. The sudden intense pain caused Koku to involuntarily switch to battle mode, but he was too weak to resist and could only watch as Yuna was taken away again. Minatsuki, the man in charge, was utterly ruthless. He summoned two more underlings, knowing well that Koku's regenerative abilities were very strong, and they planned to exhaust him to death. Keith finally opened his bag, revealing what appeared to be an ordinary gun, but he had his own plan. The villains, taking advantage of their numbers, tortured Koku brutally, trying to exhaust his strength. Minatsuki, thinking it was enough, ordered the spaceship to launch a dense barrage of swords, which were actually iron rods with barbs designed to capture Koku. Fortunately, Koku struggled with all his might and was not pulled up, but he was still at a dead end. At that moment, Keith suddenly appeared from the side. Minatsuki, disdainful, was not afraid of such firearms since he had superhuman abilities that allowed him to heal quickly from ordinary bullets. However, after being shot, he noticed something was wrong when smoke started coming from his arm. Keith, knowing their weakness to blue steel, had pre-treated the bullets with it. Minatsuki's accomplices became alert, aiming to kill Keith, but a man in the background insisted that Keith must not be killed as his entire body would soon fail. So, they carried Yuna and quickly chose to retreat. Left alone, Keith pondered over his father's notebook, while Koku lay unconscious in the back seat, finally remembering the sealed memories. As children, he and Yuna had made a pact to help each other by creating a specific symbol anywhere needed. The symbol's left side, B, represented Koku as subject number 13, and the Roman numeral 4 corresponded to Yuna as number 4. This is why Koku obsessively left this sign at crime scenes, even arranging trains in this shape. Later, when their lab was attacked by Market Maker, the two were separated. The boy who took Yuna was Minatsuki, now the leader of Market Maker, whose eye could alter memories, thus controlling Yuna to join them. Keith's father, their creator, was betrayed and stabbed by a young Minatsuki, while Koku was surrounded and his companions died protecting him. When Koku returned to the lab, he found Keith's father barely alive, who handed him a notebook with instructions. Following the professor's wishes, Koku harvested all the abilities from his companions' bodies and implanted them into his own, gradually becoming the true black-winged king. This explained why Koku possessed multiple different abilities. The painful memories were actually sealed by his own eye. Every corner of the criminal's room was crammed with dense formulas. When the police entered them into a computer, they produced an image strikingly similar to Lily. However, the girl in the image was actually Erica, the sister of the criminal they were pursuing, Keith. This explained why Keith had always kept his distance from Lily. Police records clearly showed that Erica died 8 years ago in a gruesome murder, and the perpetrator was a psychopath named Kyle. However, Keith, a genius detective, never believed this. Keith's intelligence far exceeds that of ordinary people. Just yesterday, he was a key figure in the serious crime unit, and now he is not only falsely accused of being a fugitive, but also suspected of harboring the notorious murderer, Killer B. But Keith knew that Koku, who had slaughtered numerous criminals, must know the truth about this Kyle, who was actually the first psychopath killed by Koku. Indeed, according to Koku, the real murderer of Erica was not Kyle. However, Kyle had recited the crime details verbatim in court, confirming Keith's suspicion that there must be a bigger mole within the police department who might be like Koku, not an ordinary human. He called the police chief who wanted to capture him. On the surface, the chief urged Keith to surrender and come in, but in reality, they communicated everything clearly using subtle code. Both knew too well that the police department's electronic devices had been compromised. They exchanged no unnecessary words, a testament to their 20 years of understanding. However, if Keith did not surrender soon, the police would officially issue a warrant for his arrest, which greatly worried Lily, who cared about him. She urged the chief to change the search policy and deploy all officers immediately, but the chief uncharacteristically told her to leave and even confiscated her badge. While Lily cursed the chief and drove off alone to search, the chief, though he had dismissed her, was well aware that all electronic devices had been hacked. The villains were monitoring their every move, and revealing Keith's location would surely lead to his immediate demise. So he had secretly equipped Lily's car with a GPS tracker and added special encryption to it, allowing him to track Keith's location discreetly. However, the villains' technology was so advanced that they could crack even the newly installed tracker without anyone noticing. But Keith, with his extraordinary intelligence, was not so easy to find. Lily ran around frantically and ended up exhausted in the middle of nowhere late at night without finding him. Suddenly, she remembered a strange dish Keith had once made for her, which sparked an insight, and she immediately drove to a particular restaurant. At the same time, Koku grew impatient. He met with Keith only to learn the location of Market Maker's base and rescue Yuna, whom he longed for, but Keith insisted on going to a restaurant late at night before he would talk. Feeling played, Koku thought about ending this slippery detective with one strike, but ultimately compromised and followed Keith for the meal, as information on Yuna was more valuable than anything. Keith pointed to the sky, and Koku was astounded to discover that Market Maker's lair was actually in space. Just then, Lily suddenly arrived, catching them both off guard. Furious to find her boyfriend with a fugitive, she furiously confronted them. However, she was unaware that Koku was actually the notorious murderer, Killer B, who had been outsmarting their serious crime unit. Under these circumstances, it wasn't something Keith and Koku could simply talk their way out of. Lily's arrival also meant that Market Maker had learned of their location. A girl armed with a semi-automatic Barrett rifle found them. How brazen can villains get? They murder in broad daylight, yet simply showing a pattern on their palm causes arriving police officers to salute them, even offering to kill more people for them. They have access to the latest military tanks, which are not even available to the armed forces. Without Koku's intervention, they nearly reduced the city to rubble. Their headquarters are located in the absolute safety of space because the villain's leader is actually the top boss in the police department. All their criminal activities are tacitly approved by the government, and their technology far surpasses that of regular police forces. For instance, the Barrett rifle used by the girl operates like a machine gun. They kill whoever they want, and even Keith, dubbed the greatest detective, is no exception. Without striking back, they would be riddled with holes. Koku couldn't care less about revealing his identity, abandoning the good guy image in Lily's eyes and immediately switching to combat mode. The girl was merely a failed experiment, unworthy of mercy in the eyes of the Black-Winged King. Koku's sword was their natural nemesis. So with one strike, he obliterated the girl who tried to ambush them. This enraged the girl's sister, who incessantly nagged at the boss, demanding revenge. But the boss had his own plans and wasn't about to let an inferior product dictate actions. He casually strangled her, tossing her aside like trash. With the obstacle removed, it was time for the hidden mole to act. But unbeknownst to him, all this was anticipated by the genius detective Keith. Keith seemed to return to the serious crime unit and surrender voluntarily, but in reality, he had already gathered evidence. He had planted a listening device on Gilbert earlier, suspecting him for 8 years as the mole and the murderer of his sister. Now, with solid evidence, he could finally confide in his teammates. The so-called interrogation room had no cameras connected to the internet, ensuring no leaks that could alert Gilbert to escape. The Serious Crime Unit agreed to use Lily as bait to meet Gilbert alone, as she closely resembled Keith's sister Erica, a resemblance likely to provoke Gilbert into action. Lily pretended she couldn't catch a bus home late at night, setting the trap. Gilbert took the bait and drove off with Lily in his car. The unit not only equipped Lily with a tracker, but also followed them by car, ready to intervene. Despite being longtime colleagues, Lily and Gilbert chatted and laughed during the drive, even stopping calmly for a car wash, causing the team to sweat in fear for Lily's safety. Fortunately, the vehicle continued normally and arrived at a multi-million-dollar mansion. The tracker showed them moving slowly inside, but this was not Lily's home. It was Gilbert's. It appeared he was about to act, but the mansion was dilapidated, with no lights, clearly uninhabited for many years. Boris and his partner blindly followed the tracker, tensely searching each room. Hearing a noise from a second-floor room, they cautiously approached and kicked in the door, expecting to capture Gilbert. However, the person inside, spouting nonsensical words, was not Gilbert, but a member of Market Maker. The reason the tracker led them here was because the Market Maker member was wearing Lily's clothes as a decoy. They were also strapped with several kilograms of explosives. It seemed Lily and Gilbert were swapped during the car wash. The Market Maker member detonated the explosives without hesitation, blowing the once valuable mansion to ruins in an attempt to kill Boris and his partner. Fortunately, they survived. The scene shifts to a dark room where Lily lies manipulated on an operating table. This girl is terribly unlucky. Her only task was to act as bait to lure out an undercover agent. But now she has actually been captured by the undercover herself and is being cruelly manipulated. The man before her is monstrously inhumane. On the surface, he has worked as a forensic scientist with the Serious Crime Unit for over a decade. But secretly, he has been committing murders right under the noses of the police. For all these years, no one suspected his true identity as a mole. He captured Lily simply because she bore a striking resemblance to his first love, Erica. What's incomprehensible is that Erica was someone he had personally killed and dissected. This reveals his perverse, sadistic nature, and his preference for killing those close to him, such as his father, whom he turned into a specimen. After realizing they had been deceived, the Serious Crime Unit began frantically searching for his and Lily's whereabouts. In an effort to trace their vehicle, the chief of police even went so far as to personally redirect 2 satellites. However, the satellites only showed that they had visited a seaside hospital, which only connects to the police department by regularly donating bodies to the forensic department. It's highly likely that Lily, unconscious, was disguised as a corpse and taken to the police department. This indicates that Lily and Gilbert might be somewhere within the police department itself. Investigator Kayla, shocked, found that the time records showed Gilbert had not clocked out to leave. This confirmed that Gilbert was still somewhere in the building. Realizing something, Keith immediately accessed all the construction plans of the police station from the past 300 years. The data revealed a large hidden room right under their noses, which had remained undiscovered for 8 years. The chief wanted to call for backup, but Keith rejected the idea on the spot. After all, given the current state of the police system, there are very few people they can trust. So Keith and the chief quickly headed to Gilbert's office. Keith, with his extremely high IQ, followed the clues to find the secret room switch, and then took the elevator down to the underground chamber. When they cautiously turned on the lights in the secret room, they were greeted by countless bodies, and only a pool of blood remained on the operating table. Lily and Gilbert had vanished. At that moment, Keith's phone suddenly rang. Gilbert had called him, speaking nonsensically, trying to lure Keith into a detective game. Gilbert then destroyed the phone's information and killed 2 duty officers, clearly intending to steal a police car to escape to a specific location. Keith and the chief arrived at a morgue where Lily was found naked among the corpses, thankfully only unconscious due to an injected drug. She was immediately taken to the hospital for treatment and recovered quickly. Only Keith noticed a capsule at the corner of Lily's mouth when she was rescued, which actually contained a clue left by Gilbert. Pretending to care for Lily at the hospital, Keith actually went alone to confront Gilbert. When found, Gilbert was not only calm, but repeatedly played videos of him dissecting his sister to provoke Keith. Gilbert was utterly inhumane. Keith raised his gun, ready to shoot him, but Gilbert was convinced Keith would not fire, knowing Keith had never personally killed anyone. Meanwhile, the Serious Crime Unit noticed Keith's solitary action and followed the clues to the scene. Gilbert then aimed his gun at the door. Gilbert's goal was to push Keith to his limits, a form of art that ordinary people might find incomprehensible. The girl woke up to find herself completely naked, even being toyed with by the man before her. However, she did not give in, knowing that even though she was in the villain's base high in the sky, Koku was already on his way to rescue her. Indeed, at that moment, Koku was on a cliff. After a long wait, the fierce wind suddenly stopped, but then an even stronger updraft surged. Koku then leapt off the cliff. According to Keith's instructions, he only needed to spread his wings 20 meters from the bottom of the cliff to soar straight up to the high altitude. Yet, that was not enough. Koku braced against the harsh wind and snow, bursting through the clouds and gliding above them. He then transformed his wings again, flying towards the distant stars. The extremely cold air at high altitude even formed ice on his face. Even as a superhuman, Koku struggled with the harsh conditions of the high altitude, his skin cracking and wings gradually fracturing. Fortunately, he managed to land successfully on the villain's base. Koku transformed his hand into a blade to cut through the entrance and successfully entered the spaceship. At that instant, Yuna's hair turned white, and Koku was no exception. This confirmed the prophecy on the stele, marking this as the Black-Winged King's final battle. However, a man claiming to be Minatsuki appeared, declaring his intention to become the new Black-Winged King. Koku transformed his hand into a blade and clashed with him. Minatsuki, being a semi-superhuman, fought back fiercely against Koku. Soon, both of Minatsuki's blades were chopped off by Koku. Koku just wanted to know Yuna's whereabouts, but by then, Minatsuki was nearly insane because he was merely a puppet. The real leader named Minatsuki, who had the same memory-manipulating eyes as Koku, had controlled this man since his childhood. Sending him was just a way to buy time. Reluctantly, Koku delivered the final blow, turning him to ash. However, the real Minatsuki had already taken Yuna away in a helicopter, tied her to a stele, and began torturing her. After that, he insanely detonated the base, attempting to kill Koku. Fortunately, the Black-Winged King's regenerative abilities were strong. Although he lost an arm, he survived. Following Keith's intelligence, Koku quickly located the real Minatsuki. Seeing the injured Yuna made him even more furious. But according to the stele, the closer the Black-Winged King got to the stele, the more his powers, including his regenerative abilities, were weakened. Taking advantage of Koku's weakened state, Minatsuki even pulled out a handgun for a sneak attack, immobilizing Koku for a moment. Minatsuki believed he was destined to become the new king as the stele had foretold. Within minutes, he had tortured Koku beyond recognition, even shooting him additional times to ensure he was dead. And then he turned to Yuna, intending to kill her. However, he underestimated the situation. Seeing Yuna tortured again, Koku summoned his last strength to break free, ready for a final struggle. But his supernatural arm was also severed. Minatsuki planned to end Koku, now weaponless. But unexpectedly, at that moment, Koku transformed his leg into a blade. This was the sword given to him by the deceased Izanami, which unexpectedly came into play. Minatsuki couldn't dodge in midair, and his ordinary blades couldn't withstand Koku's attack. The battle finally ended as sunlight streamed in, and Minatsuki slowly turned into ash. Koku successfully rescued Yuna, and they started living a normal life. Yuna even went to college, while Koku, seemingly harmless on the outside, continued to punish criminals in secret.